On the last episode of Menace, the Ken story. Ah, man, listen. I hadn't really heard her speak before that point. Well, other than the confused a few seconds before. When I heard her say her name, it was like music. Shelonda's voice was deep and sultry, kind of like an old jazz singer. It kind of threw me off a little bit. She was so small. I guess I expected her to have a little kid voice. My heart started thumping. She made me so nervous. But I was in. There was no turning back. I told her that my name was Ken. And for no reason other than pure nervousness, I said, "It's Ken," with all capital letters. It's on my birth certificate that way and everything. I wanted to kick myself as soon as I said it. It was like I just couldn't get it right. But weirdly enough, she laughed. And it wasn't one of those cute little girl giggles. She threw her head back and laughed. And that was it. All of the nervous energy just went away. Ken showed back up. I just kept her talking. I asked her questions, whatever came to mind, and she answered them. The conversation just flowed naturally, and I loved hearing her voice. That was the second day that I saw Shelonda. And even though we had just had our first real conversation, I knew that I wanted her. Yep, that day, day 2. And it was on from there. She opened the door and I walked in. Shelonda was in the 9th grade, so most of our classes were on different hallways. Even still, I made sure to connect with her as much as possible. After a few days, I knew when she went to her locker. When she went to her locker, I went too. I carried her books and walked her to her classes, even if that meant I'd be late to my own. We had health on A days, and I claimed the seat beside her as mine. That was my seat, and you couldn't have paid somebody else to sit in it. Well, one guy tried it. I pulled him out of that seat and pushed him onto the floor. No one else tried after him. We had PE on B days, and I did whatever Shelonda wanted to do. For the most part, we walked around the track. It gave us time to talk, even though we didn't talk about much in the beginning. Sometimes we were just dead silent. I'd look at her and she'd look at me, and we'd both smile. It was just comfortable. Being around her felt like a hug. I hadn't ever felt that way, but I wanted to feel it every single day. I couldn't have cared less about school, but when I met Shelonda, I wanted to go because she was there. I walked her to a bus every afternoon. I would always watch her walk away and think, dang, I wonder if she feels this too. It was like that within 2 weeks of me meeting her. Chapter 9. She Smiled, I Smiled. Narrated by Shandora Warren. Music by Epidemic Sound. My whole life had been turbulent to that point. From the time I could remember, Pops was cheating, Mom and Pops were fighting, we were getting kicked out of apartments, Kenny and Pops were fighting, Pops was selling and or smoking crack, crackheads were in and out of our apartment, and Pops was getting beat up. Grandma died, we moved into her house, Kenny got killed in front of me, I got kicked out of school, I started working for Rob, Pops got locked up, and Ma had a pending case. Everything was out of order. It always had been. But Shelonda was the first and only innocent thing in my life. Everything about her felt untouched. She was gentle, and I wasn't used to that. But it felt good. I smiled when she smiled. Then one day, I realized that I hadn't smiled since Kenny died. She pulled that out of me every single day. It didn't matter what was going on. When she saw me, she smiled. And when she smiled, I smiled too. After a few weeks, school wasn't enough. I asked Shelonda for a phone number so we could talk at night. And there was that innocence again. Shelonda was 14, but she told me that she wasn't really allowed to talk to boys. I wondered about her life at home. In my mind, I thought her family was like the Cosbys. She seemed like the type of girl who was protected. Like she had a mom who taught her how to sew and a dad that didn't play about her. I was off base with that one, but that's another story. We didn't let the situation get in the way though. Shelonda told me that she could sneak on the phone after her parents went to bed, so we agreed that I would call her at 10 o'clock that night. I walked her to a bus that afternoon. She smiled, and I smiled too. But then life had to switch gears. Hot Boy picked me up from school that afternoon and we headed over to Rob's spot. I improved myself over the summer, so Rob was letting me do a little bit more. He still wasn't letting me touch the heavy stuff. I was a weed boy. I was just allowed to sell a little bit more weed. That was cool though. Hanging out at Rob's gave me somewhere else to be. I understood why Kenny always wanted to be there. They were like a family, but everybody had a place. Everybody had a partner. Rob was like the father figure. He was older and he was the obvious head of the operation. He gave out the orders and everybody followed him. Mike and Tommy were a couple of older cats that hung around. They kind of felt like uncles. Mike and Tommy had been around Rob for a long time. As a matter of fact, Tommy was with Rob the first night when he peed up Pops. Mike and Tommy were the top guys. They handled the big drug transactions. And if anything was going to go down, they were the ones that Rob trusted to have his back. The rest of the guys felt like brothers. Lorenzo and Mac actually were brothers. They were in their early 20s and had been working for Rob since they were in their teens. They were basically street kids that came to Rob because they didn't have any guidance. They sold crack and cocaine, but on a smaller scale. And then there was Hot Boy. I learned that Hot Boy got defaulted to Rob out of tragedy. Rob dated Hot Boy's mom for years. He wasn't Hot Boy's biological father, but they got really close. The relationship didn't work out with Hot Boy's mom, but Rob still spent time with him because he loved him. Hot Boy's mom ended up passing away, and Hot Boy got sent to live with his grandmother in another state. He didn't want to be there, so he started acting out. Rob stepped in and asked if he could take him. And even though his grandmother didn't even know Rob, she let him go. But in her defense, she was an older white lady who barely even knew her mixed grandson. She had no idea about black culture, and she was from a small town in Ohio where she was raised to be afraid of black people. She ain't have no idea what to do with Hot Boy. That was years before. So Rob took Hot Boy in. His only requirements were that he followed the rules, finish school, and not cross him. Hot Boy followed the rules, he finished schools, and he didn't cross them. He knew better. Kenny had been in a weird transitional space. He was young like Hot Boy and probably should have been a weed boy, but he had proven himself to Rob and moved up faster than what was normal. He was Hot Boy's partner, but Hot Boy was still selling weed. Kenny was selling crack. And then there was me. I guess I was Hot Boy's new partner, with Kenny being gone and all. I wondered, am I gonna go and live with Rob if Ma gets locked up? I ain't got no family either. Time moved like a slug crawling in molasses that day. Me and Hot Boy rode around doing all the things we usually did. We sold weed, we smoked weed, and we talked to girls. I looked at my watch. How is it only 7:30? I asked. Hot Boy laughed. You got somewhere better to be? I didn't want to tell Hot Boy what was going on. In a world like ours, a crush felt like a dirty little secret. We were the guys that got girls. It was easy. Not only that, but we were the guys who slept with girls. That was easy too. I felt foolish explaining that I agreed to call a girl at 10 o'clock, and I was anxious about it. Not only was I anxious about having the first phone call, but I was anxious about calling a girl that I couldn't even touch. Shelonda had to sneak and talk on the phone. When I thought about it, it blew my mind too. So I decided to leave that part out. I told Hot Boy that I had something to do and I needed to be home by 9:30. That way, I'd have time to get myself together before I called her. I finally made it home. I wondered how the conversation was going to go. I'd made a habit of keeping up with Shelonda at school, but maybe it would be different. I didn't really have to talk all the time at school. Sometimes we were just around each other, but we couldn't do that on the phone. We had to talk. I called Shelonda at 10 o'clock. I heard her voice, and I smiled. It was easy from there. I sat on the porch and talked to her for about 2 hours. Before we hung up, I asked if we were going to talk again. She said, absolutely. And we did, every night at 10 o'clock. We talked about anything and everything. I was surprised at how easily I opened up to Shelonda. I didn't go into details, but I told her that Pops was locked up and that Mom might be getting locked up too. I told her that I had gotten into some trouble the year before, which is why I had to repeat the 10th grade. I left out the part about Kenny and how his death prompted the fight at school. I was mostly honest with Shelonda. I told her that I hated school. I was also honest about the fact that she was the one thing that kept me going back every day. On the other side, Shelonda told me that her life at home was pretty strict. Her stepdad was a preacher, and she was pretty much raised in church. Until recently, she had been forced to wear skirts or dresses every day. I couldn't even imagine that. After talking on the phone, we never had a dull moment when we were in person. The biggest things I learned about Shelonda were the things that she didn't say. They were just observations. I learned that she was a bit shy and reserved. I could tell that she was a deep thinker, and she always thought about how she would respond to things. Shelonda was smart. She had a way of wording things, and I loved it. It was natural for her. I remember her saying that our gym teacher was so very androgynous. She continued, as if I should have known what she was talking about. I looked at her and said, "So what?" She said, "Huh?" She didn't know what I was asking because she assumed that everybody would know what the word meant. "What the heck does androgynous mean?" I asked. "Oh," she said, "it's when someone has both masculine and feminine characteristics." I could only laugh because even the explanation was wordy. That's who she was, and I didn't know anybody else like her. I liked that. Long story short, I had to lock her down. I hadn't ever had a serious girlfriend, but as far as I was concerned, Shelonda was it. She was gorgeous, smart, and as sweet as pie. And if I wanted her, I could guarantee the other dudes wanted her too. It just so happened that I got to Shelonda on the second day of school, and the other guys were probably scared to challenge me. But she had a mind of her own. What would I have done if she wanted somebody else? I wasn't trying to let it go there. I went back to the words that Kenny said to me on the day that he got killed. We were at the malls, and he was giving me advice about girls. He said, "We're young, and we got a long time before we need to be thinking about settling down. But this is the trick. Every girl you deal with got to know their place with you. That's how you keep it from getting messy. If you meet a girl and you just want to sleep with her, don't promise her anything other than that. If that ain't enough for her, let her walk. You can replace her. You ain't got enough energy to treat all of them good. But if you find somebody that's worth it, treat her better than you've ever treated anybody else. You ain't even got to be faithful to her, but make her feel like she's the most important thing to you, and she's going to return the favor." I had to be honest. Me and Hot Boy were running like crazy. I knew that I was probably going to sleep with other girls, but I ain't even want Shelonda to look at another guy. I know that sounds selfish, but it was different for us. Shelonda was a good girl. She couldn't even come out of the house. She could barely even talk on the phone. In order for me to deal with her, I had to understand that I couldn't touch her. I was okay with that because there was so much more to her. But I'm saying, I was 16. After having all the free sex that I wanted, being abstinent with Shelonda was a hard ask. I was prepared to treat her better than I had ever treated anybody else because I felt like she was worth it. I was going to give her all the attention and conversation she wanted. I was going to make her feel like she was the most important thing to me. I just knew I was going to cheat on her. She wasn't going to be with nobody else though, and that was that. I ain't even play around. I didn't ask Shelonda to be my girlfriend because I wasn't trying to give her a chance to say no. Me and Shelonda were in a gym. It was late October, maybe early November, so we weren't walking around the track. It was kind of chilly. We were sitting on the bleachers. I grabbed her hand and started the conversation. It went like this. I said, "Hey, look, I like you a lot. You like me too, right? I'm not going to keep acting like I don't know what I want. I want you to be my girlfriend. But this is the thing. You can't do a lot of playing around. There are a lot of guys out there that would love to be in my spot. The only person that can say no is you. I don't want to be out here looking crazy, and I don't want you to waste my time. So I just need you to stay out of everybody's face but mine, okay?" Shelonda looked up at me. She smiled in that shy but sweet way that she always did. "Okay," she said, and that was it. She smiled, and I smiled. Thank you so much for listening. Please follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to purchase books by Shandora Warren, they're all available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and some in hardback formats. Please like and follow this podcast, and feel free to share it with your friends, family, and frenemies, because all relationships matter, even the toxic ones. Thanks so much for helping me to create the world that I want to see. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Shine, little girl.